The excavations at Tyrins over the last 120 years have brought to light and to life one of the most important Bronze Age centres, not just in mainland Greece, but in the Eastern Mediterranean. The walls girding the citadel of Tyrins were built in 3 main phases and gradually fortified the entire hill, from the south highest part to its north lowest spur. They were built of red and grey limestone, which is abundant both on the hill itself and on the hill of Prophetess Ilias, east of the citadel. On the lower citadel, the early 13th century BC wall was replaced by a mighty, virtually freestanding wall, almost 7 meters thick. The north and lower spur of the hill of Tyrins, the lower citadel, was fortified for the first time in the early 13th century BC. This fortification was replaced during the third building phase of the wall in the mid-13th century BC by a mighty wall up to 7 meters thick, which follows the natural contour of the hill and extends southwards to meet up with the fortification of the middle and the upper citadel. Today's visitor to the citadel of Tyrins follows the same route as its ancient counterpart. The entrance is on the east side, which is somewhat puzzling because the modern road lies to the west of the citadel. In antiquity, however, the road between Argos and Epidaurus ran to the east of the citadel. Although Schliemann and Dragendorf opened trenches in this area, in which traces of buildings and pottery of the early Helladic and the Mycenaean period were found, the lower citadel remained unexplored for many decades. Until the early 1960s, when in the course of restoration work on the west side of the wall, the built accesses to the subterranean water supply were discovered. The so-called syringes and its northwest part was excavated. The prevailing view was that the lower citadel was uninhabited in Mycenaean times, and fortified to be used simply as a refuge of the townsfolk of Tyrins, in time of attack or siege. The lower citadel is connected to the upper citadel via the north extension of the corridor. It also has 2 approaches of its own. Tyrins was first inhabited in the Neolithic age, as the few pottery finds attest. On account of later building activity, which disturbed the earlier levels, the Neolithic pottery from Tyrins is highly fragmentary and not associated with architectural remains. 10 building complexes were investigated in all. They seem to have been residences, also used as workshops for working metal and precious materials. The buildings of this period were razed to the ground by a destructive earthquake at the end of 1200 BC. The earliest architectural remains are dated in the early Bronze Age. Large house complexes have been found all over the area, occupied by the Mycenaean citadel. A central street led from the north gate to the south of the lower citadel and linked up with the corridor leading to the upper citadel. In the second half of the 13th century BC, there was an upsurge in building activity, causing the destruction of the remains of the earlier Mycenaean and Middle Helladic periods. The lower citadel was arranged on a terrace and built to a single plan. The lowland area around the citadel was inhabited continuously from the Middle Helladic, or even from the early Helladic, down to the end of the Mycenaean period. This settlement must have been quite dispersed, even in late Mycenaean times, in the years after the major earthquake. On reaching Tyrins and beholding the walls, one encountered an enormous ramp, 47 meters long and 4.7 meters wide, with a large retaining wall on its east side. This ramp, part of which has been reconstructed in modern times, led to the level of the main entrance to the citadel. On passing into the wall's interior, we encounter a corridor, which is flanked to the east and west by the sides of the wall of the third and second building phase respectively, and links the upper with the lower citadel. The Great Gate is almost equal in dimension to the Lion Gate at Mycenae, and built of the same material, breccia. The corridor south of the gate was roofed, and functionally part of it, creating an independent imposing building some 8 meters high. This ended in the double door, the earliest entrance to the citadel, fragments of the foundation of which are visible today. Beyond is a first outer court, the bailey, of trapezoidal plan, which was formed east of the entrance in the second building phase of the wall. All that remains of this complex today are 4-column bases. On the edge of the Argolic Gulf, at a short distance from Nauplion, the Acropolis of Tyrins rises impressively on a rocky hill. The hilly landscape is covered with olive and orange groves, and dotted with the ruins of the important Mycenaean city of Tyrins, birthplace of Hercules. Excavation of the site began in 1884, when Schliemann, the first to excavate at Mycenae, turned his attention to Tyrins. The German Archaeological Institute, in a number of prolonged campaigns, has laid bare much more of the site and continues to work even today. The central court of the palace, which forms a unit with the Great Palace, is delimited on 3 sides, east, south and west, by a colonnade behind which there were walls. There were small openings into corridors, and rooms leading to the wings of the palace. The Palace of Tyrins has special significance for the followers of Homer as well. Now that Homer is assigned to the late 8th century, while the destruction of the Mycenaean palaces is put in the late 13th century, a question arises. Could Homer have been influenced by Bronze Age palaces when he describes them in his Odyssey? This complex comprises the Great Megaron, the central court flanked by 2 wings of buildings to the east and the west. In front of this complex, there's a second outer court and a small propylon. The Galleria, with its counterpart to the south, is not only one of the most impressive parts of the citadel, but also a remarkable technical achievement of the Mycenaeans. This impressive architectural technique is based on the gradual projection of overlying boulders, from the lowest to the highest point, so that the 2 inclining faces are supported by a single stone at the top, that functions as a wedge and transfers the loads to the sides. The dimensions of the South Galleria are slightly different. The corridor is 21.9 meters long by 2.5 meters wide, while there are 5 rooms on its south side. The walls are built in 3 phases and were gradually extended until they included the entire hill. The earliest version was erected early in the 14th century BC and enclosed the higher southern part of the hill. It followed a somewhat irregular course to take in a roughly quadrangular area, measuring roughly 75 by 125 meters. These fortifications were expanded at some time around 1300 BC. Here, a large bastion was built at the southern end of the citadel, where it was most vulnerable. The ramparts were also extended to the east, to enclose the area in front of the former gate. The archaeological site of Tyrins played a vital role in the development of classical Greek culture. This city has influenced European art and literature for more than 3 millennia.